Greetings! Today, for day 18 of my book spotlight, I am so excited about reading this next book. Let me tell you guys, I love photography. I have always loved capturing people, their essence, their smiles. I love capturing beauty in everyday life. And, I have been inspired over the years to pick up my camera and really capture people in the best light. I know as a person of color growing up, sometimes pictures were taken and I was so dark you couldn't even see me. I understood the importance of having the right lighting. And I know when I started my photography business, I wanted to make sure that I always captured people in their complexions so that you could appreciate who is there, see details, see the eyes, see the hair. And so I have heard over the years about Gordon Parks. He was a photographer, African-American photographer, back in the day that did some fabulous work. And I know quite a few people now who are just phenomenal when it comes to photography. But I had not heard James Vanderzee before. And so excited about this book that I picked up at the library. And it's called Take a Picture of Me, James Vanderzee. And in this book, we get to read about someone that doesn't get the same attention as Ansel Adams and some other folks that are out. We see museums and art galleries that are just focusing on collections of theirs. But this is an individual that captured people in Harlem. And what is so amazing to me as I read this story is I was seeing that not only was he capturing people in New York, but back in the day, he was using different techniques so that he was basically touching up people, right? Doing photo edits in a dark room. Y'all, it is so hard to edit photos in the dark room. And it's not to say like it's so hard that it's impossible, but you're testing things out. And then after you test out the strategy, you still have to go dip your photograph in the different solutions and then have some time where you let it kind of sit and then you see if it worked, right? The patience level he had to have to edit these photos was amazing. And what I loved as I read his story is he was so focused on capturing people in their best lights. He took time. He didn't try to rush the photo. It wasn't about how many people can I see today. He wanted to capture them on film. So without further ado, we're going to get right into this story. Take a Picture of Me, James Vanderzee, written by Andrea J. Loney and illustrated by Keith Mallett. Deep in the heart of Lenox, Massachusetts, in a white frame house nestled between his aunt's home and his grandparents' house, lived a boy named James Vanderzee. James was the oldest boy of 3 sons and 2 daughters. At the Vanderzees, the children learned about music and art and kindness too. James played the violin and piano. He also liked to paint, but drawing people was hard. He could never get their expressions right. James wanted to share the beauty he saw in his art. One day, a man came to the Vanderzee home with a huge contraption called a camera. It was the only camera in Lenox. Boom! The man took the family's picture and left. Later, he returned with a photograph that perfectly captured everyone's smiles and their mother's sweet gaze. Now this is how you make great pictures, thought James. I want a camera. In a magazine, James found a contest where the first prize was a camera. To win, he had to sell the most sachets of ladies' perfume. After months of selling sachets, James won. He won! But the camera came in parts, and the parts didn't fit together. So James had to start over again. He weeded his neighbor's garden for $1/4 a day until he saved $5. And then James was the second person in Lenox to own a camera. First, James took pictures of his family, then his classmates. Soon, people from all over town were saying, Take a picture of me, James Vanderzee. At home, James turned his closet into a darkroom and learned how to develop film. It wasn't easy to create photographs, but James loved his family. He loved his town and the people in it, so he always worked to make them look their best. Far away from Lenox, the world was changing. Many Black families were leaving the segregated South to start new lives in big northern towns like New York City. James was ready for an adventure. At the age of 18, he took his camera and moved to Harlem. Whew! Compared to Lenox, Harlem was big, fast, and exciting. James had to hold on to his hat to keep his head from spinning. After working as a pianist, a waiter, and an elevator operator, James finally got a job as an assistant photographer at a portrait studio in New Jersey. Many big city customers came to have their portraits taken. James couldn't wait to take their photographs, but his boss sent him straight to the darkroom. He said customers would not want their portraits taken by a Black man. James did not like the way his boss took portraits. His boss shot the photographs too quickly. Sometimes the customers weren't even ready. In the darkroom, James worked hard to make everyone look their best. One day, his boss left for vacation and put James in charge of the shop. James promised to take care of the business, but in his own way. Instead of rushing the customers, James talked to them. He found their natural smiles and the perfect backgrounds. James treated the customers like family. In the darkroom, James made their pictures look even better. He brightened people's eyes, straightened their teeth, and fixed their hair. He saw what was special in everyone and captured each person's story on film. When James's boss returned, he found a line of customers saying, "Take a picture of me, James Vanderzee." So James went back to New York and opened his very own portrait studio in Harlem, where the neighborhood was jumping with brand new music, art, books, and glamour. This cultural celebration was called the Harlem Renaissance. Just about everyone, politicians like Marcus Garvey, athletes like Joe Louis and New York Black Yankees, and world-famous performers like Florence Mills, Bill Bojangles Robinson, and Mamie Smith wanted fancy portraits taken by James Vanderzee. James photographed the rich and the poor, but mostly the middle class, and this distinguished him from many other photographers. At the time, photographs of Black people were often sad and grim depictions of poor farm workers and struggling city dwellers. But when James stepped behind the camera, click, boom, everything changed. James used beautiful backgrounds, fancy props, and elegant clothing to help people of his neighborhood look their best. In the darkroom, he fixed photos and combined images to create perfect portraits. Even James's street photography captured the pride, beauty, and joy of Harlem. People all over the world proudly displayed James' photos in their homes, in their businesses, and close to their hearts. But the world was changing again. Cameras were now smaller and cheaper. People could take their own photographs. Soon, customers stopped coming to James Vanderzee's studio. James tried to keep working. He took passport photos, shooting tiny portraits that helped send folks on faraway adventures. Eventually, though, James had no choice but to put away his camera. Instead, he fixed up old photographs sent to him by people from around the world. Several years later, a visitor arrived at James's studio. The Metropolitan Museum of Art needed photographs for an exhibit on the history of Harlem. They found thousands of photos showing thousands of Harlem residents, all taken by James Vanderzee. The exhibit was called Harlem on My Mind, and James' work was a huge hit. People said it was like walking through 40 years of the history of Harlem. The photographs showed the Harlem of families and churches, friends and clubs,
neighbors and celebrities, the Harlem of love, pride, and community, the Harlem that James Van Der Zee always saw in his heart. And people came to say, "Take a picture of me, James Van Der Zee." So James stepped behind the camera once again. Click, click. And that's the end. They do give us an afterword at the end of this story. And we can see James Van Der Zee in Lenox, Massachusetts. This is in 1900. We see the interior of the GGG photo studio. This was taken in 1930. And then we see a couple in raccoon coats in 1932. We see the Alpha Phi Alpha basketball team in 1926. Donna Musenden Van Der Zee in 1982. Right here, here's a portrait of a woman before it was retouched. And look at how he retouched it in 1930. And this is like fabulous. I'm telling you, we use Photoshop now to do this. I can't imagine retouching like this. I mean, some of this would be dodging, but it's hard when you are in the darkroom. I did take a photography class in college and I would try to work on some things, but it's just, it was time consuming and you hope that it came out right. Future Expectations in 1926. See that image? And he put in there little kids. Right here, you see the Chocolate Soda Wagon, 1928. Daddy's Girl, 1937. Then we see the bibliography and some additional books that we can read. Well, I hope you enjoyed today's story. Take a picture of me, James Van Der Zee. Well, until we read again, take care.